Hello and welcome to the Fit to Transform podcast, where you learn how to train and diet effectively and, most importantly, how to maintain those results for life, once and for all. I'm Nikias Tomasiello, a transgender training and nutrition coach working online with anyone who's ready for a true lifestyle transformation, anywhere they may be in the world. As a friendly reminder, any and all information provided is for educational purposes only. You should consult with your doctor before implementing any changes to your diet and exercise program. With that disclaimer out of the way, thank you for being here. Now grab yourself a cup of tea or pre-workouts and enjoy. Yo, dear listeners, welcome back to the podcast. Today I'm sitting together with Clara Swedlund to talk about exercise psychology. So, Clara, first of all, thank you very much for joining me on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to have this conversation.
I really want our listeners to get to know a little bit about you before we get into the conversation. So, as I ask all my guests, who are you? What do you do? And why are you so awesome at it?
The awesomeness immediately, I'm like, but my name's Clara, like you said. I'm a sport and exercise psychologist in training at time of recording. I'll be done being a trainee in about 8-ish months. And I'm also an online fitness coach. And my background is in dance. I started off in like the dance world. That was my introduction to exercise. And then I started going to the gym when I moved to uni. And just through one thing and the next till into the fitness industry, knowing that I wanted to become an exercise psychologist, got into bodybuilding, which I'm sure we might cover in today's conversation. And through that, became an online coach, never intending to do it as any kind of source of income. But I guess I decided to become a level 3 PT because I thought, well, I want to be an exercise psychologist. That kind of makes sense. And then through pandemics and things that happen in life, that became kind of what I was doing. And over time, I've basically integrated online coaching, physique coaching specifically, with applied exercise psychology. So what I do is I support my clients in developing a better relationship with exercise, whether that is increasing exercise, maintaining exercise, or reducing exercise, through a structured exercise and nutrition program. And I do that through tailored psychological support. So again, exercise is the context in which the therapy takes place, and within that we kind of discuss the ins and outs of whatever is showing up. And why am I so awesome at what I do? I guess because I am one of the few people that does what I do. There's not many exercise psychologists who also work as online coaches, and there's not many online coaches who also have a qualification as a psychotherapist. Specifically, there are some psychologists that are also PTs and stuff, but exercise psychologists not so much. So I think that's what makes me quite good at what I do.
I agree. You're quite unique in what you do, which is why you're here on the podcast today. And in fact, the first question I had for you was about definitions. If you could explain the difference between sports psychology and exercise psychology, because when I was really only familiar with sports psychology before I learned about your work. And to me, sport immediately brings up the mental image of an athlete. So if I hear the word sports psychology, as somebody who's not a competitive athlete like me or my listeners, I might feel like the conversation doesn't include me. But I appreciate that you're very specific when you introduce yourself on your website, and as you've just done on on the podcast here, you say I'm an exercise and sports psychologist. Exactly. So clearly there's a distinction, which I like to hear about.
Yeah, there is a distinction. And I think, like, personally, I identify as an exercise psychologist, but the official title is sport and exercise. So as you said, a sports psychologist is a psychologist who specializes in working in sporting environments. So typically, as you said, they might work with athletes. They might support an athlete in improving their performance through mental skills training, visualization, emotional regulation. They might support the athletes on and off pitch in the off season through injury rehab. They might work with sports coaches. They might work within an organizational level, like within, I don't know, like say the FA league or things like that, to support the kind of, I guess, like making it more psychologically informed within those sports settings. It doesn't just have to be with elite athletes, any kind of athlete. And I guess that's where it gets a bit murky. Exercise psychology works within the scope of exercise. So anybody who chooses to move their body with intention would be someone who would perhaps benefit from the support of an exercise psychologist. I guess what people who specialize in that domain or that part of the and sport and exercise, we work in using psychology to promote exercise engagement and to promote more helpful relationships with exercise. So like I said, whether that is helping someone with exercise initiation, whether that's supporting them with maintenance, or whether that is supporting them with decreasing the amount that they exercise, that's kind of what we specialize in. So it's not as clear cut as making someone faster. It could be that with someone you work on building up their motivation and making that more sustainable motivation. It might be that with someone else you work on supporting them through exercise anxiety. People might feel really anxious about exercising, whether that be the feelings that show up in their body when they're moving their body, or whether that be entering exercise environments because they don't feel like the environments are inclusive of people that look like them or who maybe feel like them, or whether that is supporting the maybe more disordered end of thoughts for people who find themselves tangled up in excessive exercise, or exercise becoming or being the only coping mechanisms that they maybe have available to them. So that I guess would be the broad brush distinction. The issue or the question I always have in terms of definitions is, if someone is, say, like a recreational runner and they seek out the support of a sport and exercise psychologist, is it sports psychology or is it exercise psychology? I'm not sure. I think it depends also on how the person identifies themselves. Like some people identify as athletes. I've worked with bodybuilders who identify as bodybuilding athletes, and I've worked with bodybuilders who don't identify as athletes, they're just bodybuilders. And so it doesn't matter for what we actually do, not really, but it's an interesting discussion. It's something that's actually something that we talk about a lot in the industry, in the world of sport and exercise psychology too. So I like that question.
Yeah, I'll explain what I asked, and it is because, again, to me, the association between sports psychology that I have with sports psychology is that it pertains to athletes. I wanted to start with this so that the listeners know, even if you don't identify as an athlete, this conversation is still going to be about you, because what we're going to talk about is the relationship between the self and exercise, from what I understand from your answer. So my second question then would be, I think it would be really interesting, if you're open to it, to delve into your own relationship with exercise growing up.
Yeah, that's a great place to begin, is always the beginning. So like I said, my background is in dance, so I've never really been into sport or like really ever identified myself as someone who enjoyed exercise. I was always an active child. Like I moved a lot. I liked cycling, surfing, running about. I liked PE in school. I just kind of, I liked moving my body, but I never, I was 0% talented at sports. So anything that involved a ball, I would run in the opposite direction. Like I hated it. I don't know if I can swear on the podcast, but I fucking hated it.
You can.
Terrible. I was much better at cheering people on and coming up with a choreography to support them. And so I did ballet from about the ages of 5 to 13, and then got like into modern dance. I competed in hip hop nationally as a team until I went to uni. And then in uni, I continued to compete in dance all the way up until finishing my master's degree. But when I moved to university, well, I guess like throughout that time, again, I enjoyed dancing, but I never saw myself like as someone who was like particularly active in that way. Like I was active, but it wasn't really, I mean, I also engaged a lot of like unhealthy behaviors. So I used to smoke as a teenager. I would take any opportunity to get drunk. The first time I went to the gym, I was, I think, 16, and I had a cigarette before and after with a friend of mine. So, I mean, that tells you everything you need to know. And I would Skype PE all the time. I had my period every week because I just couldn't be asked. I just did not like it, and it was dumb. Like the way that they did sports in school, certainly for me growing up, it was always like, no, PE, it was always sports based. And so it wasn't about being active. It was about how many times can you dribble a basketball, and I just didn't care. So yeah, scrap that as quickly as I could. But then when I went to uni, I could see the gym from my uni halls, and I was like, well, yeah, okay, new city, new me, time to change my life. And I started going to the gym, initially motivated by wanting to change the way that I looked. I've never had a good body image at all. And not that it ever led me to do anything about it from a physical activity perspective. But when I went to uni, I was like, okay, time to change my body. I can do something about this here. And very quickly, I just fell in love with the gym. I not obsessed in a bad way, but I loved it. So I would go, 5 days a week. I'd do my cardio, I'd do my abs. I would spend like 2.5 to 3 hours in the gym, but I was happy as fuck. Like it didn't feel like a chore. I was just chuffed. Did I know what I was doing? I was clueless. I would like the way that I would track my reps would be I'd have like particular songs for each machine, and I would do like a song on a machine. So that was kind of anyway story for another day, but I loved it. I just absolutely loved it. And the main thing that I started to notice was that they like I just felt happier, I just felt better. And I just moved from like, the Basque Country into Scotland alone, didn't know anyone. I'd gone through like a breakup at 18, but like we'd been together for 2 and a bit years, and I just wasn't struggling as much as I thought that I would. And I kind of thought, well, there must be something here. And I was studying psychology at the time, thinking that I'd be a clinical psychologist. And I was like, well, seems like exercise and psychology should be kind of related. Is this something that you can study? And, lo and behold, you can. And through that time, then I kind of pretty much immediately knew that I wanted to become an exercise psychologist. But that didn't mean that my relationship with exercise was steady. First year of uni was great. You're 18, you can drink 3 times a week, you can smoke every day, and like nothing really happens. You look great. And then in second year of uni, I met my now husband, and I started to experience a lot more mental health issues in my second year of university, around anxiety, perfectionism, and the rest of it. And that meant that exercising became really difficult. And I just would have panic attacks in the bathrooms. And then third and fourth year, I was able to, get back into it, but it started to get a little bit warped with my relationship with food. And it just got a little bit prickly and complicated. And then after finishing my undergrad and before I started my master's, I took a year out, and I was like, right, I need to get my shit together here because I'm not in a great place. And that's when I started working with a coach because, well, I was going to do my master's in Loughborough, and I was like, well, I need to look good to go to Loughborough. So, and I kind of felt like having the accountability of a coach would be helpful just to kind of get myself, not overthinking food all the time, because that was just becoming such a headache, and I just would avoid the gym because I was overthinking food so much. Which would be interesting to unpack with you actually, because you're at MNU. But anyway, and through that, then I decided to do a photo shoot, and then I discovered bodybuilding, and then that grew arms and legs, competed for the first time, loved it. Again, being a dancer and a performer, to be on stage, in a bikini, which was unimaginable, like unfathomable to a younger version of me who would like, not eat before going to the beach, because I was that self-conscious. To do that was like mind blowing, and I loved it. Continued to compete, and then once I'd finished competing in like 2021, I'd done about 10 shows over the course of 4 years. I kind of ended up a bit burnt out and realized that exercise was not like, I was almost like a bit too dependent on exercise. Like if I didn't exercise, I would lose my shit. And so then I had to kind of like rein it back in. Went to therapy to get some support around that. I also lost my period. I'm telling you my life story here, but I lost my period in and around that. So it was kind of like lots of things, and it's been lots and lots of different things. But I'm now at a point where I'm fit and I'm healthy and I enjoy moving my body, but it doesn't feel like an obligation. It really does come from a place of joy and exploration and curiosity and excitement, and it makes me feel like I can fulfill lots of things that are important to me in terms of my values and how I want to live my life. But it feels a lot more grounded. It's not because I want to change my appearance. It's not for any kind of other reason than pursuing a goal in and of itself. So I mean, that's a podcast in and of itself, but hopefully that gives you a bit of a flavor of my journey up until, I guess, this point.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, thank you for being so open to share some really private and personal matters here. Um, what I gathered from what you said is a first important takeaway from this episode, that your relationship with exercise is going to be non-linear, and
Mm.
that's okay. Like
Yeah,
you just mentioned, struggling with exercise, and also struggling not to exercise too much,
yeah.
all in basically the same life story.
Hmm.
And that's just a sign for everyone listening that it can happen like that. You can have peaks and troughs in your relationship with exercise. And
Yeah.
there's also a light at the end of the tunnel that seems like you have found personally.
Yeah, yeah. It like, and I think it's important to your point there to acknowledge too that like just because I'm an exercise psychologist doesn't mean that I'm not human first, and that you know
Hmm.
my my personal challenges aren't what qualify me to do my job, but you know. I am also human and I've also had a relationship with exercise, and that's not been smooth sailing. I think in a way it makes me better at what I do because I've got a bit more empathy for my clients, and I can understand because I've got lived experience. But I mean, it's not necessary to have lived experience to be able to work with someone and to be able to empathize with them and to support them. But yeah, it's and I think it'll continue to change. I'm sure there'll be many different life stages too that are yet to come, in which my relationship with exercise has to evolve and it has to become something different. But I feel like having gone through the last sort of 13-ish years, I'm like, okay, well, if I've done that, like I'm sure I'll be fine.
Yeah, I think the more you see your relationship with exercise grow, the more resilient you become.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Because you just learn from it. And I guess with every single time, it's not, you never start from scratch because you're bringing like your current version of you with all that experience into whatever challenges that you're encountering. And again, it's evolving even like I'm sure that as my applied practice as a psychologist, increases and improves, and as I develop as a psychologist, that will also have an implication, that will also have an impact for how I view exercise. And I'm sure that, if we were to re-record this conversation in 10 years time, perhaps things that I would tell you would be really, really different in terms of how I view what I'm doing now. And I can't know that yet.
Yeah, absolutely. And that brings up another thought for me, which is another good point to take away from this, which is not to beat yourself up for where your relationship with exercise is at right now, which is something that's very common. We always beat ourselves up for when we know that we have a relationship with something that doesn't serve us, but we can't change it. We know it rationally, but then in the moment, we always go with what we're used to. And it's very important that, in my opinion, to try to see it as a stage in the journey that is going to change.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, as you said, it's a well, beating ourselves up not going to help. And also, I don't think anyone chooses to find themselves in a tricky place with exercise or with whatever it is that they
Hmm.
find themselves struggling with in that particular moment. It's not really by choice, it's just by circumstance and by things that happen. And there are always things that we can do, and I guess from an exercise psychology perspective there's lots that you can do to improve someone's relationship with exercise. But if it takes a bit longer, if it's a bit more difficult, if you find yourself wherever you're at, or if you're fine and then that changes, that doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with you. It just means that, congratulations, you're human. And I think that's pretty good news in my opinion anyway. I'm always relieved to know when someone's human and not just some sort of robot or something like that.
Fair enough. So my next question then, since we're on the topic of health and exercise, what does a, in quotations, healthy relationship with exercise look like in your view?
I think it depends, which is the cop out answer. But it depends on what is helpful or unhelpful for that person. So when we talk about words like healthy, unhealthy, I like them, but I like to use the words helpful and unhelpful a bit more, because the same behavior, the same amount of exercise might be helpful, totally fine for one person, and yet might be really unhelpful for a person. And I think the difference that makes a difference is certainly my experience and in my, I guess, applied practitioner philosophy, is the function of exercise. So what is the purpose and the intent of exercise? What role does exercise play for that individual? let's just say if exercise serves the function of coping, but it is the only coping strategy that someone has available to them, that
Mhm.
would potentially be quite unhelpful long term, because
Mhm.
after, as problems increase, they become more and more exercise dependent. Um,
Mhm.
if someone, if the function of exercise for someone is to punish themselves, to cause themselves harm, to cause themselves pain, also, I mean, it goes without saying that's quite unhelpful. If the function of exercise is to numb, avoid, push away from different other difficult thoughts and feelings, or if the reason for exercising is because one has a deep dislike towards themselves and towards the way that they look and things like that, then I would consider that to be quite unhelpful. But what that looks like is so person dependent. Someone might be, two people might be training for the same event, and what they do on paper could be exactly the same, and yet how they experience it, how they view exercise, the function of that exercise that they're doing, could be so different that one person might end up, in a really, really poorly positioned, potentially, with relative energy deficiency, with, other conditions, if they were a menstruating female with, HA conditions or things like that, with injuries, and another person might end up, thriving and just completely, in a fantastic position and really able to fulfill other meaningful goals in their life. So for me, it always depends on the function, not so much on the quantity. Although, I mean, of course, to a degree, for your average person, I would say that
Mhm.
if you're having to fit your life around exercise for too long, with a particular goal that demands that, I would maybe, just gently raise the question of, what's kind of going on here? Let's sort of unpack this a little bit. Whereas, for someone who's an elite athlete, they might be exercising 3 times a day, but that's perfectly, totally fine so long as they feel okay about
Mhm.
it. So yeah, I don't know if that really answers the question, but it depends.
What I'm hearing you say is that your relationship with exercise, uh, um, um, helpful relationship with exercise,
Yeah,
as you said, isn't down to how many sessions you do in a week,
yeah,
or it doesn't have to do with the training program that you
no,
follow. It has to do with the role that plays in your life.
that's
If it
exactly.
plays a helpful role, then it's a helpful relationship. If
Mhm.
it plays an unhelpful role, like, for example, it's a crutch,
Yeah,
it's the only crutch you have to deal with your issues, or if it's the only way you allow yourself to eat, or if it's how you punish yourself when you feel
mhm,
that you deserve punishment,
yeah.
that's an unhelpful relationship.
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. And so, like you said, it's not so much the quantity, but it's sort of how we view the role of that exercise for sure.
Very intriguing. I want to circle back to the three types of clients that you mentioned you
Mhm,
typically see. You said that you help people who need exercise reduction, people
mhm.
who need exercise maintenance, and people who need an exercise increase. So I
Yeah.
was thinking maybe we can touch on all three of these
Mhm.
typical issues. Maybe we can talk about where they come from, what type of struggles people tend to encounter, so that you can also give some practical suggestions on where people can start if they want some help
Yeah.
around, if they want to start helping themselves around those
Yeah.
issues.
Absolutely. Where do you want to begin? Which one of the three?
Let's start with what people struggle with the most, which is exercise initiation and increase, because the average person doesn't do enough exercise. So that's what I would want to cover first.
Yeah. So I would say that I mean, like you said, it's the life or the world that we live in right now doesn't really facilitate regular physical activity. And if someone's not being raised to be physically active, if their environments haven't been set up from a young age to be physically active, it can become really, really difficult to maintain it. Equally, often life changes mean that it becomes increasingly difficult to either, like, say someone might have been really sporty when they were younger, but then, like, through life changes, they become a student, then they become a parent, and then they have a full-time job, and the next thing you know, they just don't have time. um,
Hmm.
I think that shows up a lot. One of the things that I see most commonly with like a struggle to initiate exercise is for people, or certainly in, I guess, in my line of work, the people who might end up working with a psychologist who's also a coach, people who have experienced or who have been overweight for the majority of their lives, who've experienced lots of body shame, lots of, they've learned lots of fat phobia, and they've learned to really dislike themselves and be really ashamed of themselves, how they present to the world. And off the back of that, the barrier to exercise, it's not so much time, etc. It's, even just, experiencing their bodies in movement, and the types of clothing that are sort of sold for exercise, like leggings or clothes that will stick to you when you start getting sweaty. Experiencing all those things brings up a lot of anxiety and a lot of discomfort for them, and so that can be a huge barrier. I've worked with a lot of clients who were bullied extensively for the way that they looked throughout their lives, and so then they go, well, I want to lose weight and I know I need to go to the gym for it. So why am I so stupid? Because I'm not going to the gym. And I'm like, well, let's kind of unpack this, because if the question that I always say to clients is like, wouldn't it be weird if you'd been bullied your entire life for how you look, to just suddenly, enter an exercise space and not feel a little bit anxious about it? And they go, oh yeah. I'm like, yeah, you used to get bullied in PE, didn't you? Oh yeah, they used to call me this, that, and the other. Does it make sense that like part of you might just be a bit apprehensive about entering exercise spaces in which, as far as your mind is concerned, why would people not say nasty things about you? They've said them before. So it makes sense, right? And that's a lot of that sense making is where I start with those types of clients, because I go, well, I'm not surprised that you don't want to exercise. It's normal that you don't want to exercise. And they go, oh yeah, it is. And that starts to break down that shame barrier. They might feel ashamed about their bodies, but they're also ashamed about the fact that they're ashamed about these things. And it's, our minds can get super tangled up really, really easily. And in I guess starting there, it isn't so much about getting someone to the gym, but it's getting someone to a place in which they feel like they can tolerate the possibility that someone might think something about them that is unfavorable according to their mind with regards to their body. So it's almost like, you're not going to get rid of the gym anxiety, because it makes sense that your brain has been hardwired through your life experiences to anticipate that someone might criticize you. But are you willing to do this thing that's clearly important to you in spite of that, as opposed to not doing it because of it? And it's building up that distress tolerance. So a question that I love asking clients, kind of, I guess, in that camp, is this question of willingness. And I guess I ask clients this question all the time, but are you willing to experience whatever difficult thoughts, feelings, emotions, sensations, urges that show up when you try to do this difficult thing in the service of moving towards what's important to you, which might be, I don't know, being more active with their kids, being able to run about the park, being able to go out partying with their friends and not, being able to be more sociable and deepen their connections, being able to have sex, naked, things like that, which are important to them. Are you willing to experience that discomfort in the service of those things that you've told me that are important to you? And by building up on that willingness and building up on that tolerance of that distress, through skills like compassion, through skills like acceptance, through skills like psychological diffusion, mindfulness, and contact with the present moment, etc. Building that capacity so that the anxiety as such doesn't go away, but it's more bearable, so they can still, it's not about, I've got my magic wand, let's get rid of that bad feeling. It's where you're not going to feel very good, but are you okay feeling not so great for a little bit, if that means that you get to see yourself do this thing that's important to you, which is then going to build your self-esteem, which is then going to make you feel good, which is then going to give you that sense of praise that might get you going and kind of showing up over and over.
So it sounds like the way you help people initiate exercise is, first you break down the shame barrier, as you called it, that they have around, all of these negative experiences they've had throughout their life. Once the shame is gone, or at least is reduced, then you move on to helping them create this stress tolerance. So develop the ability to live with the fact that yes, people will make comments about them even now, but they still they basically still want to do what they want to do, and they'll do it regardless.
That's it. And then from there, and I guess like breaking down the shame and the stress tolerance, they come kind of hand in hand, but that's exactly it. And that then facilitates or makes it a bit easier to get going. And often it's the getting through the doors. And I have had clients just, as a task, just go drive to the gym and just sit in your car and then drive away and just notice what shows up, write it down, and talk to me next week and let's unpack it and let's work with that. And then sort of, get into the gym and, go to the changing rooms and walk back out, or go to the gym, walk on the treadmill for 5 minutes, super, super slowly, and fuck off. And then next week do that again. And then, work on building up that, it's graded exposure, really. Building that capacity. It's a bit like, it's no different to actually going to the gym and, let's say, lifting weights. Your strength increases the more reps you do, and the more kind of your body adapts. And then the next time you were warming up with the 2 kilos, and now you can warm up with the 10 kilos because you've gotten stronger over time. It's not a direct analogy, but it's really similar in that we can build up that capacity that we've got in our minds, that then makes it easier to initiate exercise when some of those barriers are more manageable. I wouldn't say that they ever are going to go away. I think it's quite helpful actually to be aware that people can say nasty things. I think that's we can thank our minds for just wanting to protect us. But obviously, when it gets in the way of doing the things that are important to us, then it's not super helpful.
That makes sense. The key point that I hear there is something that I think a lot of people struggle with, because and that's the point that you make about gradually building up to this and breaking it down into steps, where the first step isn't even going to the gym. The first step is to normalize that you don't have a good relationship with exercise right now. And I think this is important because when people want to get into exercise, typically they will jump with both feet into doing something crazy like a five per week training program, and then maybe they even accomplish it for a week, and then they burn out and they stop and they fall off, and they will beat themselves up for it. So I think a key takeaway from this would be, hey, if that doesn't work, it's never worked before, so maybe we need to make it simpler still.
Absolutely, that idea of workability. And I think it's interesting you mentioned that, because the clients that do struggle with exercise initiation, when I say, okay, let's just start off by like go for walks, but I want to go to the gym 5 days a week, and I'm like, okay, then do that and come back to me. And then they do it, and then they're like, oh yeah, that was awful, it didn't stick, and I feel like a sack of shit. And I'm like, okay, well, you've done this before, and how well has that worked for you? Yeah, not very well. Okay, are you willing, back to that willingness, are you willing to try something different? Give that. You can only bang your head against the wall so many times before you start to wonder why you've got a headache, and then after that we go, all right, well, that wasn't working before, so let's do something completely different. Are you willing to not go to the gym for the next month? Okay, they weren't going anyway for the last 6 months. They've maybe gone 4 times in the last 6 months. But the idea, the thought of not going to the gym, of not being on some sort of weight loss regime when that's been their entire lives, it's, that's distressing. And again, it's working with the things that show up. But sometimes just being there compassionately for a client when they feel like they have to do those things, because it is like, it's bloody hard. It's really, really hard. I get it. I get it.
Yeah, that it is very hard. Now, once you've gotten them through the door, another misconception I think that can come up is, well, at this point they've built a habit, so they go forever. So tell us what actually happens even when somebody has successfully initiated exercise.
Yeah, well, it doesn't always work like that, and I think it also depends on that person's kind of the general mindset. Typically, again, the people that I work with have a perfectionistic tendency. They do say your vibe attracts your tribe, which is, I think, why I attract perfectionists, because I am a perfectionist, and I have always, very much all or nothing, black or white. I go, and if I've missed 3 sessions and it's Wednesday and I'm not going to do it, then fuck the gym, fuck my drag, and I'll start again on Monday. And I'm just like, I'm not doing it. So yeah, not that helpful. And a lot of my clients are exactly the same. So often when we initiate exercise, it's about maintaining it. And in maintaining it, it's getting used to the fact that it's boring a lot of times. It takes a lot longer than you think that it's going to take. And also, the types of exercise that the internet has told you that you should be doing might not be the type of exercise that you enjoy doing long term. And in there's like an element of curiosity and exploration that I think is important to be able to nurture and to unpack, and without shame and distress. Because I've had clients, be like, okay, yeah, let's go gym and I'll do the gym and this, and then they, 3 months later, they're like, I fucking hate the gym, and I'm like, why are you just telling me this? Like, what? This is news to me. And they're like, I just really want to go for a run, and I'm like, and you've not done that? Why? And they're like, oh, I don't know. I'm like, oh my goodness, like what the hell? Let's try something different. So yeah, so that maintenance piece, finding something that is enjoyable, is important. Not to say that exercise has to be enjoyable. Now, if someone's listening and they absolutely despise exercising, are you willing to not like the thing that that is helpful for you to do for like 5 hours a week max? Are you willing to not like that in order to be able to gain the benefits of it? I guess that's the question, and that's something. You don't have to like exercise, because a lot of people think that they do, and then they feel bad because they don't, and then that's a whole other spiral. But yeah, in maintaining it, I always link that to values, and I always like to think of, certainly in my role as an exercise psychologist and coach, the way that I position exercise and just generally health behavior is almost like how can having time for these things carved out every week, how can that springboard you, or how can that facilitate, or how can that enable you to do all the other things that are important to you in your life better or more of, or stop you from doing the things that you don't want to be doing in your life. So it's not about making, I mean, for some people, for some clients, yeah, they want exercise to be their whole personality and they go on to pursue, competitions and goals or whatever that might be. But for most people, it's how can we teach you, how can I help you see that when you are consistently exercising, that when you are consistently eating in a way that feels nourishing, balanced, flexible, that you feel that you can show up better in your work, that you feel like you can show up better in your relationships, or in any of the other values that you've told me are important to you. In that maintenance piece, it's about linking it to, exercise facilitates all these other things that are important. It's not, I mean, it's important in and of itself, but it's not over here. It sits almost underneath. And it springboards everything else, so it allows you to do everything else. And I feel like once you can kind of get someone to that point in which they recognize that, actually, it does really help me. Like when I carve out this time for myself, when I go in and do my workouts, when I do what I said I was going to do for exercise, it helps me do what I said I was going to do and be more self-efficacious in other areas of my life. Then it creates that positive reinforcement loop. But yeah, for me, it's always about linking it to what someone values and thinking about how does this add to your life, because then that also helps us kind of clock when things become potentially unhelpful, because then it starts to take away. And that's an important thing, a skill for people to learn, because it's quite easy to go from zero to the extremes quite quickly. And I think, thinking of how does exercise add and how does it facilitate rather than inhibit or get in the way of, is a really helpful way to reframe that, that sustainability of exercise.
That makes sense. And now circling back to what I was saying before, where your relationship with exercise might be non-linear, there might be times where even with all the best intentions to maintain exercise, you stop and you have a trough in your relationship with exercise. So in that situation, how would you suggest, how would you help a client?
If they've been active previously and they've just had a bit of a sort of lull and they're trying to get back into it, I guess it's curious to know like what's showing up for them. Especially if they've tried getting back into it, but they've kind of got some sort of internal barrier. I'd be curious to know what's showing up. I'd work with what's showing up. Is it, I don't know, sometimes people are scared of seeing the losses that they've made in their fitness and they don't want to start because they don't want to confront that. Sometimes they're ashamed of their body has maybe changed in that time frame, and it's like, maybe they used to be peak fitness and now time has gone by, and it's difficult. I guess it wouldn't be any different to the way that I help anybody else, or like the kind of other two types of clients that we just described there, understanding what's showing up for you that's getting in the way. And rather than trying to move past it, how can we move through it? What do you need to move through this psychologically? Like that discomfort, if we assume it's not going to go away, what do you need in order to be able to cope with that discomfort in a way that enables you to do the thing that's important to you? And again, it's the basics of, starting small, and in that case, then helping the person cope with the difference between where they were and where they are now. Maybe helping them reflect back and think about thinking forwards, because a lot of people ruminate on, oh, well, I was, 20, I used to be able to do all this. Yeah, well, you're 45 and you've got 2 kids and you're just below the CEO of your organization. So, buddy, it's not going to be the same, I'm afraid to tell you. And reconciling those ideas and building that back up. And again, just reminding them of, like, I mean, are you trying to be like you're in your 20s again? Like, do you want to go back to boozing every weekend and, pissing about and not having these things in order? And they go, actually, no, I don't want to. I'm like, okay, well, what are we working with right now? Again, why is this important to you? And, if you were to go back to exercising as much as you did when you were 21, what would you have to sacrifice right now? Oh, time with my family. Are you willing to do that? No. Well, there you go. And it's learning to, again, more of the same shit, really. Learning to sit with the discomfort of, whatever it is that shows up, whether it's something that gets in the way, whether it's something that shows up in the moment, and coping with that, learning to be in the presence of it, coping with it non-judgmentally and with compassion.
Thanks for explaining that. I think so far what's been really refreshing for me, and hopefully for the audience as well, is that you've made it very clear that it's acceptable not to have a good relationship with exercise, and also that it's acceptable not to enjoy exercise even when you're trying to exercise more and you actually accomplish it. Because I believe in the fitness industry, especially on social media, there's a glorification of exercise as being this activity that everybody loves, in particular as it pertains to my particular area. I specialize in helping people change their physique as well as change their lifestyle and improve their body image. And in the physique world, it's assumed that you're going to love training and actually lifting weights specifically, and you're going to hate cardio. So if you don't belong to that gang and you're like, oh, I actually quite enjoy running every now and again, you also feel a little bit left out. So I think it can be very refreshing to hear from an exercise psychologist and coach that, hey, if you don't like exercise, that's fine.
Absolutely. And I think, you make a great point. There's this assumption that we see on social media where, I think it's great that, people are promoting physical activity and that it's in fashion to be physically active. I mean, that's bloody awesome. But at the same time, it can create so much shame for those who don't enjoy it. And that's just another barrier. And, it's important to realize that you don't have to like it. I'm sure a lot of us do lots of things that we don't like. I hate, doing admin and doing taxes and shit, but I have to do it. Like, it's shit, but I have to do it. And, if exercise is the one thing that you get to not love, but, that you're willing to do because it adds or it means something more to you, like it's in the service of something else, then then so be it. Then how can we cope with it? Then what are the types of modalities of exercise that we can explore that might be more enjoyable for you? Like, maybe you just need to go and walk up a mountain. Maybe you need to go and do some mixed martial arts. Maybe you need to join a run club. Maybe you need to join a social badminton team. I don't know, but it doesn't have to be go to the gym, legs on a Monday, arms and shoulders on a Tuesday. It doesn't have to be that. I love that now. I used to love that when I was a bodybuilder, but if I had to train like that now, I wouldn't go to the gym. I would not be asked for that. So yeah, it changes, and it's important to acknowledge that that's okay.
Fair enough. Now, the other type of client that you, Brian, mentioned before is the type of client who needs a reduction in exercise. And I think my first question there is, how can you recognize what are some signs that you may need to actually exercise less. Because again, with this exercise glorification that occurs in our society, it can be very difficult to even acknowledge that you have a problem where you're exercising too much, because everybody's going to tell you it's great that you're so committed and disciplined.
Yeah. Oh, you're so motivated. Look at you. It's brilliant. Yeah. That's a really great question. It's tricky. It's really tricky. A lot of times it comes from the client recognition. If it's rare. Nah, it's happened before, but it's rare that someone works with me and then their relationship to exercise changes. But I have had clients work kind of approach me and go, I think something's not right. Or they might go, oh, I'm so tired all the time. I'm totally burnt out. I'm trying to lose weight. And like, no matter what I do, I can't lose weight. And then they send me a picture. I'm like, you're literally peeled. Like, what the fuck? I think signs would be kind of the typical signs that we associate with burnout. So things like difficulty sleeping, difficulty kind of resting your mind. One of the biggest telltale signs or red flags of having an unhelpful relationship with exercise in terms of the excessive exercise is when you feel really anxious if you miss a session, or when you start to do crazy shit, you start playing life Jenga and do mental gymnastics to fit in your exercise sessions no matter what. That's when I would become a bit concerned. And I've done that. I've done some crazy shit to get my sessions in when I was a bodybuilder, competitive bodybuilder. But yeah, those would be the signs when it becomes a bit too difficult, or when you're having to do crazy stuff because the thought of not exercising is so intolerable that you can't cope, or like you start avoiding things that would normally bring you joy because it's going to impact on your exercise routine. That's a red flag for sure. But yeah, other kind of physical signs would be signs of burnout, more prone to injury, no amount of food can satiate you, tired all the time, cold all the time, low heart rate, and no amount of sleep can help you recover. All those things, physical and psychological signs that maybe something's up, maybe.
And I would add lack of menstruation or irregular menstruation if you're somebody who's supposed to menstruate.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that within the relative energy deficiency in sport, which anyone can be diagnosed with REDS, but for people who should be menstruating who are not menstruating, when that starts to go a bit funky, yeah, that's a big, 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 big red flag. It's a problem though because so many people are on contraception, on oral contraception. I mean, I was on the pill for 7.5 years, and I did not know that I had hypothalamic amenorrhea, and it wasn't until I came off it I went, oh shit, how long has this been going on for? And that was a stark realization. But if you don't want to come off the pill, then you don't, and you just go la 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 la, everything is fine. Things like even like your hair falling out, your nails breaking, all those things are clear signs, physical signs that something's up. But mentally, it's the anxiety, what if I can't hit my sessions? That's when people, that would be a sign. Because it could be, it could be for someone who's doing 7 sessions a week, and it could still show up for someone who does 3 sessions a week. Again, it's not necessarily measured by quantity of exercise, but it's in that relationship and then the function of exercise.
Yeah, absolutely. Just as we were saying before. So when you identify that you have a problem, how do you, Clara, start? What are your first steps to help a client reduce the amount of exercise that they're doing?
I think similar to with any type of client, it's helping the client realize that it's not working, like something's not up, like this is getting in the way of you accomplishing things that are important to you. Like maybe you're so wiped out that because you run half marathons every morning before work that you've got no capacity for work, and you want to progress in your job but you've not had a promotion in 5 years. I wonder why. Helping people see that it's not workable. But the place that I always start is by trying to compassionately understand how it makes sense that this is the way that it is. So I'm trying to make sure that my clients don't feel ashamed for the fact that they excessively exercise or that they're excessively reliant on exercise, because they already feel plenty of shame for that. Most people are aware, like most people know, nowadays especially, like you would know if something funky is up, that it's not too great. So I would really focus on de-shaming that by, really trying to understand how it makes sense in context. And that's something that I talk about all the time. Particularly, I guess, like the philosophy that I apply in my psychology is that all behavior makes sense in context. And so the question that I ask is, okay, well, if you exercising too much was the most logical, the most rational thing for you to do, why would that be? What explains that? And so that kind of allows us to zoom out and to go, okay, well, what's showing up that necessitates exercise to be this thing that it is for you? And is it the fact that you've never been taught any fucking coping mechanisms? Because that happens all the time. I'm like, dude, like, there's so many clients, I'm like, you've got no coping strategies. Like, are you surprised that you're coping with exercise? Well, actually, maybe not. Yeah, no shit, Sherlock. Like, how else are you supposed to cope? Like, if this works, then of course you're going to use it. Of course you are. And de-shaming it by helping them make sense of it, building their other coping skills or other ways to do things that fulfill the same need that exercise does. Again, depending on what that is. And then slowly reducing exercise, just by small increments, again, through little behavior like challenges. How about this week when you wake up and if you can't be bothered, if you have a thought of I can't be bothered going to the gym, how about you just don't go to the gym? How about you just maybe stay in bed for 5 more minutes? Or like, how about you set your alarm 10 minutes later so your gym session has to be shorter? How about you exercise in the evening instead of before work, and see how you cope with the day when you're not so wiped out that, and sort of playing about with that, but definitely de-shaming it. Building coping skills around compassion, normally lots and lots and lots of compassion, and lots of self-acceptance, again, because I don't think no one really chooses, no one goes out of their way to go, I really fancy like a terrible relationship with exercise, that would be great. Like, nobody does that. And helping them see that they didn't choose that, again, does a lot for that de-shaming process that then supports them in being able to make a change. Because if someone feels like they're the problem, if like with shame is a very localized thing, it's a very self-attacking thing, and the difference between shame and guilt is, if I'm if a child makes a mess and you go into the room and you go, oh, you've made a mess, that might make them feel guilty, but it invites reparation. Guilt invites reparation. Okay, well, I've made a mess, I can do something about it, but you're messy. Well, I'm messy. The fuck am I going to do about that? If that's a me thing, I can't change who I am. It's who I am. And so working with shame, trying to change it and trying to get clients to see that they can do something about it, that they're not just these broken humans that's, just something's fucked and it's irreparable. Working with that and just building that capacity for tolerating the distress that they are coping with through exercise. Tolerating the distress that shows up when they don't exercise so much, and kind of how do you eat when you've not exercised? How do you work with that compassionately? How do you make room for the thoughts and feelings that are going to show up when you are eating normally and you're eating carbohydrates or you're eating whatever and you've not had to justify a workout for it, those types of things. And again, it just same thing, I guess, in my philosophical approach, same thing, just applied in a slightly different way, in a slightly different angle.
I was just about to say that in the end it is the same approach, but the struggle is different, which I think is important as well, because sometimes when you have a problem that seems like the polar opposite of somebody else's, you might feel like you're on two entirely different wavelengths. So in a way, I believe it's almost reassuring to know that we all have similar struggles, even if they don't look the same, because it makes people feel less alone.
Absolutely. And that's why I started doing this year, actually recently, like group coaching calls with my clients once a month. And I work with such a wide variety of people, bodies, shapes, ages. I think my youngest client is like in their early 20s, and my oldest client is like, mid 60s. And everyone's got different goals, but the common denominators is that we're all perfectionists who self-sabotage pretty much, to an extent. And the principles that I use in therapy, in one-to-one therapy with different clients, are still applicable to teach to the group because they are relevant. And certainly it's what you said, that those struggles are, they look different, but the strategies that can help: compassion, self-acceptance, reducing self-criticism, increasing distress tolerance, making room for what shows up, and learning to be a bit more aligned with your values and a bit more contact with the here and now, a bit more mindful. Those things will help pretty much anyone with pretty much anything, certainly in the realm of work that I do in the context of applied exercise psychology, that's for sure.
And I think what's really helpful to understand, and I feel really strongly about this because I do a lot of work with body image, is that if all of our struggles, if we can all relate to each other, then in the context of body image, since you brought up how your clients are all different shapes and sizes, that helps you realize that the problems that you have nothing to do with what your body actually looks like. Because if somebody who is considered the epitome of fitness struggles with the same things or similar things that somebody who is ridiculed for being a certain shape or size, then ultimately the problem that they have has nothing to do with what they look like. So fixing your body isn't going to fix the problem. So your body isn't what you need to fix.
Yeah, that's it. And I think that's why, like, being an exercise psychologist that works in the fitness industry has been such an enjoyable experience so far for me, because I get to, like, I've got the skills and the qualification to be able to do that work and to be able to support my clients in kind of tying those loose ties in a way that, particularly for the clients that work with me that do need a bit more of that specialist help. There's a lot of people that can help at different levels, but ultimately when someone ends up working with me, or someone chooses to work with me, it's because they want a bit more of that targeted support. But you're absolutely right. We're human, we've got tricky brains, and it's about how our brains work and not about how we look. I mean, I've had shitty body image days when I was absolutely peeled to the bone on a ready to go on a bodybuilding stage, and I've had shitty body image days when I've been in a very, very different body shape and size, recovering from HA, barely exercising, and and just living a very, very different life. And again, that tells me that it's not about what my body looks like. It's so much more about my relationship to my body, and the things that happen in between my two ears become so much more important, and kind of how I feel and how I respond and what I do.
I think with that message we can tie a bow on this podcast, because I think it's been excellent. It's been such an insightful conversation for me and hopefully for the listeners. But before we wrap it up, I want to give you the opportunity to tell everyone how to connect with you, and I'm going to put the links in the show notes.
The best place to chat to me is probably just through Instagram. My main Instagram that I use for coaching is Clara_the_exerpsych. It's just a play on words on exercise and psychology. And I've got like a kind of more just psychology dedicated page, which I pretty much post the same things on. It's just the_exerpsych. That's my website too, just theexerpsych.com. But Instagram's probably the best place. If you enjoyed the podcast, I guess drop me a message. I love connecting with people, and I'm always looking forward to having these conversations and bringing a bit more insight as to how psychology does matter. And I always say it's about working in and working out, and the working in is the piece that I really find important and valuable.
Well, thank you so much for your time today, Clara. And dear listeners, thank you for your time and for tuning in, as always. And I will talk to you next time. Lastly, if you want to support the podcast and help me reach more people, please leave a 5-star rating or review on any podcast platform that you're using. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll speak to you soon.